Now, whether we like it or not, the United States is now engaged in yet another war within a Muslim country in the space of 1 decade. Now, it's been called a just cause by our president, but the details do remain murky. What is this effort going to cost American taxpayers? What does victory in Libya actually look like? Now, we were obviously quick to get in, but could anyone at the White House or on the Hill explain exactly how, and more importantly, when we're going to get out? Now, my next guest called this assault grave and says that it lacks constitutional authority. U.S. Congressman Dennis Kucinich is a Democrat representing the state of Ohio. Welcome so much back to the program, Dennis Kucinich.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
I want to start with something that then-candidate Obama said back when he was running for office in 2007. He said that the president does not have the power under the Constitution to unilaterally authorize a military attack in a situation that does not involve stopping an actual or imminent threat to this nation. Now, fast forward to March 2011, we went to this war essentially by presidential decree, almost no public debate, hardly any conversations with lawmakers or the people. Is this war legal?
It lacks constitutional authority. The president has no constitutional basis for the order that he gave, sending armed forces into combat over Tripoli.
So if it lacks constitutional authority, should there not be consequences for this?
Well, there are consequences practically, and those consequences are political. Whether Congress wants to cause the president to submit to a process for those consequences is unlikely. But I will say this, though, that we are in a fourth war here, fourth front, because you have to count Pakistan, plus Iraq and Afghanistan. When do these wars end? The United States does not have unlimited power here. We have to be very careful about making it appear that we're looking for opportunities to strike inside Muslim nations. We should be trying to find a way to effect a rapprochement with the Muslim community worldwide, which means getting out of Afghanistan, out of Iraq, out of, away from the incursions in Pakistan. That doesn't mean ceding to terrorism. It means you work with the world community on a police action to deal with terrorism. You don't drop bombs, which kill a lot of innocent people.
But the argument that these folks who support this invasion say, well, hey, we have UN approval here. It's a global fight.
Okay. It's good that the UN is involved in security matters, except for one thing. When it comes to the United States, we have a prior process that trumps the UN, and that's called our Constitution, which requires that presidents have to get congressional approval to take our country into war. If the president feels there's an imminent or actual threat to the United States, he can move forward. This threat is to citizens in Libya. That's regrettable. But last I checked, Libya isn't one of our states.
Are you prepared to initiate impeachment procedures?
Well, remember, you know, it's one thing to say that this action's outside the Constitution and raise the question of whether or not such action is or constitutes an impeachable offense. It's another thing to begin the process, which is very chaotic for a nation. But in a sense, we need to begin to describe the limitations on the power of the presidency to stop further abuse of power. And at some point, the United States is going to the Congress is going to have to move to cut off funds for any action in Libya.
At which point it might, of course, be too late. Now, I have to ask, I mean, you have all of these folks from the left actually saying that this is a just cause, that, you know, we're intervening to prevent some sort of humanitarian crisis. How do you respond to those arguments, that this is somehow just, whereas, I don't know, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, other conflicts on the ground?
Yemen, Cote d'Ivoire. I mean, look, humanitarian war is an oxymoron that needs a little bit more exploring. Bombing villages to save villages, we've been through that in Vietnam. There's a point at which we have to realize that the process of political change, as difficult as it may be in various countries, has to be done by the people within those countries. Now look at Egypt. We didn't intervene in Egypt. Had we intervened in Egypt, maybe the government would not have been overthrown. Had we intervened in Tunisia, maybe the government would not have been overthrown. We let the people of those countries take control of the process, and they did so in essentially a nonviolent manner. But what's happening here is this intervention could end up strengthening Gaddafi's hand, and it could actually end up emboldening al-Qaeda.
Well, not to mention the fact that we don't really know who the rebels are. It's not like there's some sort of concrete coalition of groups, right?
There is
what
that.
if the result is a hardline Islamist government? Then what?
That's a concern we ought to have. And when you have military leaders saying they don't know what the end game is, that should send a note of concern through everybody in this country.
Well, how quickly we forget.